us, together with an extraordinary woman by the name of Miriam Gershwin, who will reveal and share a story with you that I know will be filled with courage, inspiration, information, and motivation. She will tell you her own story, but the importance of being here and finding our voice, as Mrs. Gershwin has found her voice over these many, many decades to share her story, is an eternal call to all of us. I say this because I just returned with several of our members from attending the APAC conference in Washington, where 18,000 Jews and non-Jews, Christians and Muslims and Hindus, and people from every corner of the world came to find their voice in support of the incredible relationship between the land of Israel and the United States of America. And there was one recurrent theme throughout the entire 3 days, as we heard from those on the left and the right and the middle. That theme was to stand up against anti-Semitism. It didn't matter what part of the nation or the world. There were members of parliament from England. There were members of parliament from Amsterdam. They came from as far away as South America and New Zealand and Australia, and every one of them had a story to tell about the rise of hate, and particularly the rise of anti-Jewish hate. And anti-Jewish hate, anti-Semitism, can be found in many different forms, and particularly for all of you here tonight who are about to go onto college campuses, the number one form is known as BDS, divestment and sanctions. And you will come across many, I'll call fake news stories, that will pit you as a young, proud Jew against those who feel we are destroying the world. The next thing we learned about was the rise of anti-Semitism within governments, and that we must be alert and responsive. And the last place we learned about was that on the shores of every country where there are troubles and challenges, the easiest way to fix problems is to find a scapegoat. And that scapegoat today, sadly, in this century once again, are the Jewish people. If you take anything away from you tonight, let it be your voices. Don't ever be silent, but speak up today like Miriam is finding the energy and the strength and the koyach. Together, we're very grateful that her son Sam has joined us to share her miraculous story of survival and her hope and her request and her plea that we take her story and speak it forward. Miriam, welcome to Temple Har Shalom. We are honored by your presence.
Thank you for having me. This is the second time I'm here. I was here once as a teacher, not a teacher, for a, oh, I don't know. Can you all hear me? Yes? For a girl who was bat mitzvah and wanted to dedicate it to the Holocaust. So she used to come to the house and, she took notes and then she presented it here and I was, as her support, I came. So, I'm going to share a brief synopsis of my life and then I'm happy to answer questions. Can you all hear me? My parents, Nathan and Feige Benges Liechtenstein, were married in Russia. After the First World War, they moved to Memel with their son, Marcus. I was born in August, and if you want to know the year, in 1923. So the mathematicians can work on that. My dad was a director of a large textile factory, and we lived very comfortable. I went to a private German girls' school and had a lot of German friends. November 9, 1938. It was Kristallnacht, the night of broken glass. SS soldiers broke the windows in the synagogues and all the Jewish stores. They burned the holy books. After that night, we were not allowed to sit on park benches, go to the movies, and we had a curfew. Jewish children were forbidden from going to school, and my education ended. I had only 10 years of school and could not continue my education. I've always been disappointed that I was not able to go to college and have a profession. My goal was to be an interpreter in the United Nations. My parents decided to move to Kovno, Lithuania, where my dad had family. There I couldn't to school either because I didn't know the language. They only had all Hebrew schools, that was private and high school and I knew Hebrew, but not I couldn't take geography in Hebrew or mathematics or whatever. So I took a private course in English, bookkeeping and typing, and was able to get a job. In July 1941, World War II broke out, and all the Jewish people in Kovno were ordered to move to the Jewish section of the city. They put up an electric fence and called the area the Kovno Ghetto. Every day, groups of people taken out of the ghetto. We were told they were going to work, but they never came back, unfortunately. We were giving small rations of food and lived together with another um, in only 3 rooms, with another family in only 3 rooms. The Judenrat, a governing body, was formed and had to assign groups of people to go to work. These groups were taken to work during the can you adjust that? Because I can't read what that is in the way. Okay, that's better, yeah. The good part of working these jobs was that they worked alongside Lithuanian people and they were able to take things to trade for food. One day they told us to assemble in a big field. They selected 12,000 people, mostly women and children. They were taken away and never returned. My family was spared. I was selected to be the maid of Commander Turnbaum. He was in SS man. He gave me a document that I could walk to his house on my own and return in the evening. The work was hard. I had to clean the parquet floor with steel wool on my naked feet. One day, as I was walking back to the ghetto, a woman approached me and said that she has letters from the Vilna ghetto and asked if I would take them into the Kovna ghetto. She said that she could meet me the following week and take letters from Kovno to Vilna. I took the letters from her knowing that if a German soldier saw me, this I would have been shot on the spot. It was safer for young women to be attached to a man. Otherwise, they were taken as prostitutes. When I was delivering one of the letters, I need, like a pianist has a man who turns the pages of his notes. So I could meet a man who I had known before, and we were married in March 1942. One day they needed a lot of workers in Estonia. They came to each house and took anyone they could find. They took my mother and members of my husband's family. We never heard anything about them until after the war. My mother unfortunately perished there. Two sister-in-laws survived, but they lost their husbands and children and their mother. In March 1943, the Russians were coming closer to the German, so the Germans took us out of the ghetto. They took us to the railroad station where cattle cars were waiting for us. We were packed into the cattle cars with no food and no room to sit down. The trains traveled for over a day, and when the doors opened, some people were already dead. All the women were ordered out of the car at concentration camp Stutthof. The men remained on the train and were taken to Dachau. At Stutthof, we had to undress and go into the showers and were given prisoners' uniforms. We stayed in barracks where we slept 3 and 4 women per bunk. Every morning we went outside and were counted. We stayed outside all day. We were given a small portion of soup at lunchtime. We were watched by Polish women who hit us with batons. We sat outside in grueling sun or pouring rain. In a few weeks, we were given civilian clothes and were divided into groups 300 women, 500 women, and had to walk to little camps.
While she's turning a page, Stutthof was up in this area.
Well, I have even, if you want later, I have a map. Oh, you have that, so they can see how it looked. We slept in scout tents where we had to crawl in like a dog. The tents were supposed to be waterproof, but in the winter, when we woke up, our heads were frozen to the material already because, it was raining in the summer and it wasn't, they were probably very old tents the waterproof was finished. We did not have a change of clothes. In the, in the mornings, we were counted and went to work. We had to take a shovel, or a pickaxe and dug ditches in case the German army had to retreat. In the summer, the ground was sandy, and the sand came always back when we threw it out. Winter, the ground was frozen, and we had to use the pickaxes. And when we finished one stretch, we assembled our tents and moved to another place and started over. We also didn't have any gloves, so our hands were frozen, and with a pickaxe, it was really very, very hard work. When we were working, our guards were mostly Polish or Ukrainian, and they beat us to work quicker. But I wrote it here even, but without gloves or socks, it was very hard. At night, when we got back to the camp, we were giving soup and a small piece of bread. There were no toilets, so when we came to the field, some woman dug a hole, and that was it. We didn't have soap or water to wash ourselves, and we were full of lice. You have to excuse me for that. At the end of 1944, we noticed that the German guards were nervous, and we heard and saw airplanes flying overhead. We hoped they would put a, a bomb and kill us because, our life was so bad. The Germans got an order to bring us back to Stuttgart. So we walked back, but we didn't make it because we were surrounded with the Russian army. One evening, they led us to the little wood. One evening, they led us to a little forest close to a highway. The guards ran away. We lay down on the field and with the, and with the snow, we dug ourselves in. So I don't know, we really felt warm because you didn't have to go to work without anything waterproof. So the guards ran away. We lay down on the snow and started to pray. Suddenly, a Russian soldier on a white horse came galloping along. He stayed with us overnight, and in the morning, he told us to go until we find a town. It was cold and we were hungry, but we walked until we found a town, Czechochinok. Years ago, that was a spa in Poland. It was more for lung and nose and throat. And by the way, when he came in, he said that he was Jewish and he came on a white horse. So we women, oh, the Mashiach has come. We were so happy to see, but he couldn't, and he was hungry. He was hungry too, and he was sleepy, so we didn't get too much out of him. Let's see it. Yeah. Yes, it's a,
No, you took the wrong one.
so where is the good one?
Kids, get used to this. I'll get blamed for this later on.
Listen, my children, off the record, my children became now my parents, and I have to obey.
But we can't holler at her, so, because we're still on.
Well, this I read, which really was,
No, at the bottom of the page.
oh, yeah, um, the Czechoslovak. I was in a group of 20 women whom the Russian soldiers took to a hospital. There we were giving clothes. We were giving clothes what they had taken from the concentration camp. For the men wore striped uniforms. You probably saw it, white and with blue stripes. So that was our clothes. Oh, the hospital didn't have food to give us, but every day a soldier would come and tell us news about the war. He was the one who told us that the Germans were defeated and that the war had ended on May 8, 1944. Hmm? Yeah.
Give me that back. You're missing pages. Read that. Once the war was over.
Once the war was over, yeah. In May 8, 1944. Once the war was over, the hospital was closed, and we were on our own. One of the women who was born in Palestine went with British POWs back to England. She gave me her dress. It was a green and had red Jewish star on both sides of it. The hospital was in Krakow, Poland, and when we walked into town, we saw that the pavement was made of Jewish tombstones. So you really shouldn't, go over tombstones. So we used to jump over. If, so that meant that they had taken it from a Jewish hospital and, and did so. We traveled by train to Lublin because the soldiers told us, there is something missing. So we were on a train. No, we were on a train to go back to Kovno because we thought it might be somebody is alive or some people had taken the children and some Lithuanian people offered to keep them. So we went on the train to back to anniversaries. But the train was also done by the Russian army, so they got preference. So we stayed in a small town, and we passed, and some Polish soldiers passed us, and they said, is misteczko Amcha? So that meant that are you from a Jewish town? so, so we said yes. So they said, come down. Don't go back to Russia, to Kovno, because there is a big door open, but a very small to come out. If you but don't also stay here, because here you will never know if somebody is alive or not. So go to a bigger town. So we ended up finally in Lublin because the soldiers told us not to go to Russia. So a big and a small town. In Lublin, I I heard, you see, after the war, a lot of the men from Dachau who were, alive and safe, wanted to go back to Russia, who had the children given up to the Polish people to hide them. So we traveled to Berlin. There we had to get permission to pass through all four sections of the city. It was occupied by the British, French, Americans, and Russians. One day, two Palestinian soldiers came to my husband, and in view, my husband was alive and my dad was alive. One day, two Palestinian soldiers came to my husband in Munich and said they have a letter for him with information from their mother. The mother was also in all the camps, not with me, but in different camps. And once she was liberated, she went to Rome because her sons were in Israel, and Israel had formed, it wasn't Israel, it was Palestine. They had formed a Jewish brigade who fought with some of an Italian brigade, and they fought Germans. So anyhow, they told him that um, she checked things very carefully. One day, two Palestinian soldiers came to my husband in Munich and said they have a letter for him with information from their mother. She checked things very carefully and had good and bad news for my husband. They told him that these two sisters were alive but lost their husbands and children. But unfortunately, your wife did not survive. I don't know when or from what, but she died. My dad and husband, who had both survived the Dachau concentration camp, gathered with others on Friday night to uh, to to have Friday night services. And as soon as my dad stood up to say the memorial prayer for me, a Jewish tradition that is said to a deceased person for 11 months. The door opened, and some other friends came in and said, "Stop, we had traveled to the French border, and they found out that his sister in France and her whole family had survived. They also told my husband and father that I was alive. They did not say, so they didn't say the memorial service. I, along with other women, continued to travel on trains heading south towards Munich. The last train that we traveled on was a coal train, and I trained, so we were all covered with soot. When we finally arrived in Munich and people saw us, they ran to ask, "Do you know about my wife, my mother, my sister?" They created a commotion as the men were desperately seeking information about their families. One of the men I met when I arrived in Munich was a friend who told me that he knew where my husband was and said that he would take me to him. He knew where my husband, the next morning. There was a curfew in Munich at that time, and we had to stay inside. An American soldier walked knocked at our door and said that he had seen the commotion and he wondered if he could do anything for us. Um, so I told him that I had a cousin in Baltimore and I knew their name and that they lived in Baltimore but didn't have an address. He sent a note written to their name in Baltimore saying that I had survived, and they received that card. And I always wanted it back. My cousin didn't give it to me. So what, there's more.
No, that's it.
That's it? Okay.
Now you can talk.
Okay, so now do you have any questions? But you also have to, he has to come with a, because you know I'm not so young anymore, so my hearing isn't so good, and the eyes aren't so good anymore, and my limbs aren't good, but I'm happy to be alive. And I'll tell you, we have now 4 generations. That's me, the oldest, my son, is married and has, so I have grandchildren, and even the grandchildren are married and they have children. So there is 4 generations we are. So it's not lost. And with me, Hitler didn't win. And now I can accept questions if you have any.
Clarify the point when you said that you were a young woman coming from the SS house and another woman approached you. What was it that she wanted you to do for her?
Oh, I told you. I wanted to learn languages.
No, no,
uh,
no, no. When the lady came to you on the street and you exchanged letters.
From Vilna?
Oh, yeah, from Vilna. And the next week, I had, and in fact, my husband had family there.
The woman
Actually, that's how I met my husband, through those letters. I knew him before because we had to get out of Memel, where I was born, so we went to Kovno, what I wrote, and so I knew him. And he had a sister in Vilna. So there was a letter for a Dr. Bloomberg and another letter for a friend of mine who is still alive. He lives now in Canada. He was a young fellow, and I used to go out with him sometimes. So, in between, you want to hear my youth life too, and something is good, you know. So anyhow, so we let me take off my glasses, and I can see better because it's bifocals and it's to read and to look and so anyhow, so we where was I now? Now it's
No,
a senior
the
moment.
woman had letters from the Vilna ghetto, and she knew my mom was in the Kovna ghetto. So she gave my mom letters from Vilna to bring to people who were in the Kovna ghetto, and
Well,
then
that I
have
hope.
those people write letters back to Vilna. And my mom was an intermediary with that other lady.
So I saw the name Dr. Bloomberg, and my parents had friends Dr. Bloomberg, but it wasn't the same. And so that's how I met my husband. You know, through letters again. So now I think I'm through, and if you have questions, please.
Oh, I think there are many more questions. Please, Karen.
Hi, thank you for coming. It's been wonderful. When did you come to the United States? You can't hear me? Oh. When did you come to the United States?
To the United States, we came in 1949, and that is also a story, and I have to thank the President Truman for that, because each country in Europe had a quota to come to the United States. You couldn't buy a ticket and come to the United States. You needed from a quota. So Lithuania had 13 people a year. So I think I would have still sat there and waited for my the number to come up. But then Truman made a law that if you are, actually, they called us, the survivors, stateless, without a country. So he said that he feels that the people had learned, had very bad times, and they suffered a lot, so they can come without a quota. And by that time, I was already married. I had my son, who was 2 years old, and we took that, and we came on. It didn't cost us anything to come here. We got um, they still sent ships with soldiers to Germany and to England and the United States and to France with the Marshall Plan. So they came back. They came with soldiers, and they went back empty-handed. So we came on those boats. We had to work on the boats too. So but it was a very good drive, except the British Channel. Otherwise, we came even a day before, or you were here prepared for us, and we landed in Boston. So we were anchored off on the sea, and the captain opened the deck, and we could see and wave to America. Nobody was there, but we waved anyhow, as a welcome sign.
Yeah, we came over on the General Holbrook, which was a troop carrier, and we left from Bremerhaven. So you can see the journey we had to take from Munich. I don't know, how long did it take to get from Munich to?
And we came Erev Rosh Hashanah. Now, to come here, you can go, and say that you have to, I want to go and take me. So you needed relatives. So that's also another story how I met. My dad had a brother here in Springfield. He had a pharmacy, and they hadn't seen each other in some 47 or 48 years because he had to run away because he was a little on the left side. So they wanted to arrest him where they grew up. So he ran away and he came here and he came, a family took him who unfortunately had a son who had died. So he came with a different name here. But he was smart enough when he landed in Ellis Island to give his real name Liechtenstein. So, and then we had another uncle here. He was already a pharmacist, so he went to him, and then he learned the pharmacy, and he opened up in Springfield. Now, did we get to know that all and where he lived? And, from my dad, for Rosh Hashanah, he sent a Rosh Hashanah card, and we got the Rosh Hashanah card from my uncle, because in those days there were not phones that you could call America, or, you wrote letters, and until it came, it was. So when I knew English, so I worked during when we were liberated. We lived in Munich, and I had a job because I knew English with the American Joint Distribution Committee. That was like the HIAS, but even more because HIAS was only for immigration. And so they had different. They had food and they had stuff and So anyhow, so we had that, and so the immigration and they had sent people from America to help us, and they were all in uniform. So they took, so when people, when they are coming to a place, you go first the uniform. And we were sitting behind. So they asked, you understand Jewish? So they pour out their hearts that they want to, and they have to look for some relatives to send them papers and all this. So what to do? So she used to turn around, Miriam, what did he say? So finally they gave us also uniforms that the people shouldn't be embarrassed, who come to want help. So I even have a picture somewhere here with my uniform and how I look now, what is not so complimentary. so, so anyhow, that is my story. And if you have any questions, please. In fact, my son, he only knew German. And when he was born, our relatives sent him a a, what do you call it? A stroller from here. And it was from, I don't know, you are probably too young to remember that. It was like a carriage, and I couldn't face him that you have now that you look in. It was from steel. We had to assemble that. Oh, you know that. And it had some little that he could play. So it was the only one, the kids from the neighborhood, oh, they want a ride, a ride. So we didn't bring that along because he was 2.5 years old and he was already walking. So we left it there with friends. So we go to Baltimore, and I had him for the hand, and all of a sudden he sees, oh, yeah, I can hold it. He sees a child in such a wagon. He he throws my hand away and runs, picks the kid up at the shoulder, get out of my, and in German, get out of my carriage, that is mine. So the kid started to cry. The mother was furious. So, but she was a good sport, and I explained to her, and so she calmed the boy, and we walked away.
That's when bullying started.
We have a question here.
Yeah. So I just want to know, what do you think it is about can you tell me what it is about your personality or about you that you think gave you the strength to survive?
What? I couldn't hear it. I don't have any hearing aids. I think I'm the only one who can still read without glasses. Big, big print. And
What was it? Is in your character and personality that made you survive?
I tell you, first of all, I was like they called us Muselmen, that we gave up because I told you that I didn't know too many people. I didn't have any relatives, so was always alone. And you know, there you didn't make friends in the camp. So it was, for me, it was a very, very hard life, the 5 years.
But what was in you that made you survive, allowed you to survive?
Well, look, once you survived, I mean, I was young, and it didn't kill me. I mean, you know, and you know what it, and in fact, the women, when we used to, I think I was one even of the youngest, but I was probably meant to be a good, you know, to look a different way because they used to say, you know, when we'll be liberated and if we'll survive, what do we need? A corner to sleep and a potato to eat. And I told them, you know, ladies, when you will survive, you will want to have what you had before. No, no, no. And now you can see, you know, when you go to the, and that reminds me, when I go to the Washington Museum, to the, you know, Holocaust Museum. So you see the survivors. I talk to people, you know, and even survivors. I said, what is impressed you so much? So they said, well, the survivors now. And I say, not for me, because thanks God the survivors, they look, Kenan Horror, well fed now with gold chains, with earrings, you know, like somebody, real people should look. But the soldiers, when they, the one who liberated the camps, when they stood and wiped their eyes, that is what impresses me. So, any other questions?
Connect with your husband? Because you stopped your story in Munich about having somebody send a letter to Baltimore, but you didn't talk about getting back together with your husband. When you arrived in Munich,
When you got to Munich,
Yeah.
what did you find?
how did you reconnect with your husband? How did you find him?
Where he was?
No, how did you find him?
Oh,
Brought-
I told you, that is in my script.
No.
No,
Yes, it is.
no. See? Now you know how I feel. You messed up.
Well, you are very mean. because
How did you?
because I said when people came, when we met some survivors who came back to, who wanted to go back to Russia.
No. When you got to Munich, you knew Daddy was in Munich, right?
I knew that he was alive already.
And in Munich.
But how did you
How
find
did you
him
find
in
him
Munich?
in Munich?
Oh, well, how I found him, people told me where he lived. Because once he was liberated, he also became what were you laughing now about?
Somebody made a comment that you Googled up where he was.
No, that was in the papers because I knew that he was alive and that he, but you see, until we even came, what I didn't tell you was that the Russians, did I tell them that? That one said, come, we can let you, that I didn't. From Berlin, they,
No,
hmm?
that doesn't have anything to do with Munich and how you got to daddy.
Oh, so I told you that we met people, and they said that that my husband is, and he wasn't directly in Munich. He was in a little town next door, but they knew him because he was a lawyer before the war, and he had a practice, and people. I mean, how many were still alive? The Lithuanian Jews. So he knew him, and they said, Gershwin, oh, sure, he lives over there, and, you know, it's not here that one
A
lives in.
mutual friend, when he met my mother in Munich, brought her to where my father. Yes.
But I'll tell you, even you, the Americans, um, no, not the Americans, the British and the Russian, from Munich, they had every time a bus taking us, not from Munich, from Berlin to the border. so so we came. The bus came, and there was the Russians first and the Americans second. So the Russian said, today I don't want to let you through. And the American said, come, 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 come. Well, in the following week or in 10 days, when the bus came again with us, so the Russian opened, go. The American said, today we don't want you. So we had to go back. It took us quite a few rides from Berlin to get through. And they took us in. So when they took, we hollered so much, and the bus really did not have, you couldn't go any place further than the border. So we hollered so much that they took us, that we passed both inspections. Excuse me.
I want to just give perspective for a moment to what Miriam is talking about in terms of how met her husband, and she said there weren't that many alive. Please remember, she was from an area in Poland. You've heard the different cities of Poland. Poland was the most vibrant Jewish community in all of Europe. It was more than 3.3 million Jews living at that time in Poland.
Yeah, because that is where the Hasidim lived.
Yes, and multiple, so much Jewish life was there, and at the end of the war, there were not even 100,000 left. So you have to understand when you hear about the sheer numbers, and Mary, if you wouldn't mind, one of the things that you tell as part of your story, which
No, go ahead.
is incredible, um, is that you wanted life to continue afterwards. You married, you had a child, and yet you saw the worst that humanity could do.
Yeah.
What made you want to start again?
Oh, well, look, first of all, once you live, as I said, I told you women, you want more than a potato and a bed to sleep. And, because you have to be realistic. Once you are, but for instance, I don't like it too much. I don't like too much jewelry now. And I don't like, Raz will tell you, I'm very plain. and also with my eating habits. It's, it left you 5 years down, and bad 5 years doesn't stay, it doesn't go in the clothes, in Jewish they say, it doesn't stay in the clothes, it stays in the bena, in the bones.
You really are an inspiration, and thank you so much for coming. I had a quick question. How many languages do you know, and were you ever able to become an interpreter like you wanted?
How many
How many
languages
languages do you speak?
Well, I speak German. I also speak a little Russian because we were occupied. I speak Hebrew. I once knew it very well, but Hebrew is it's not such a very hard language, but the grammar is. There you have, here you have I and you. Hebrew is you and me and feminine and for a male different and then it's also like Befehl, leer, yeah. It is those things I forgot a long time. But now where I live, there is a few people who know Hebrew. So whenever I get a chance, I I go and I talk to them that it should come back. If I would go to live in Israel, I'm sure it won't take me too long and I know Russian, and that is also another story. My husband, he had a sister in France, so there are nieces left. So one niece, she comes here in the States quite often, and so all of a sudden she tells me that she has a Russian boyfriend. So I said, let me talk to him. So he said, why does she want to talk to me? So, I don't know, at that time I probably felt very good. I didn't make any mistakes. So he was so impressed. So last year they came here to the States, and he is such a terrific boy. So we spoke again Russian. So that is three, yeah. Well, Jewish is Mameloshen, so that you know. And you know what they say about Mameloshen? Is if the mother is around, the father doesn't have to talk. He can talk, not he doesn't. He can.
Russian is the very first language you learn. It
Yeah.
means mother's language, and you literally learn it from your mother. So her very first language that she learned as a child was Yiddish.
No, not on me. I learned right away German.
German?
Yeah, but Mama Russian is
Russian
Yiddish.
is Yiddish.
Yeah.
Is Yiddish.
So,
May I ask you, can you please, for our young people that are here, and as they watch the world and its difficulties, what advice would you give them?
well, first of all, I would give you that you should get to school to get education. But also, that's another story. You know, my son's father-in-law, he always, because that is, with me, it is, as I said, I feel bad that I didn't get an education. But one day he took me aside and he said, listen, Miriam, college teaches you, but education is when you don't have a college degree. Life teaches you, and that you have plenty. So, but no, I really,
What advice would you give the young people?
the young people, well, unfortunately, I tell you, I look now how the world is very bleakly. That the young people, what looks up to the, what they await them. And I hope it will change with the elections and with, because politics here, I mean, you probably all know about it, and I'm not a politician. And I feel that it is a very, very bad time now. Look, I have children too and grandchildren, and I feel very bad because, years ago you had a family, you played the piano. Now it's everything this and the computer. To me, that is also not realistic. You should talk it out, and now you go to the computer. But on the other hand, where I live now, I'm learning how to use a computer because that's now the language.
Another thing my mother has said, especially when she talks at schools, is that, and people have asked her if she hates the Germans or the Russians or whatever, and her answer, and correct me if I'm wrong, is always no, she doesn't hate them. That
Yeah,
they,
so in one school, a little boy, because I like, that they should ask questions. So I read and then I say, so a little boy answered, and it was in a quite rich community. So he says, listen, do you hate the Germans? Well, how can you tell children to hate? But you have to be quick and think about it. So I said, well, I'll tell you. I don't hate the Germans. First of all, they are not responsible what their fathers or their uncles or their brothers did during the war. And second, but I don't like them, and I leave it out that I don't buy anything, not even for a penny.
that's made in Germany.
In German, yeah, the German things. So the little boy says, lady, you won't buy a Mercedes? So everybody laughed, and that was because, when I go to talk, I think I told you, I invite the parents to come too. So sometimes one mother came over, she said, how can you stand in front of us and tell us a story and you are not emotionally? I said, well, you know what? I take a tranquilizer before I come. And that is true. Any other questions? But I really, I wish and I hope that political will change here and the children will go. Look what goes on in the school. The high school was, I mean, that's terrible. And here, some parents are afraid of their children because it happens because of the drugs. So please, boys and girls, there's somebody in the back.
Yes, please.
Well, I can hear you.
Yes, we'll tell you.
Occupied your mind. My,
How did you keep your mind busy during those 5 years of such horrific hardship?
Well, we didn't busy. We were all, as I said, I didn't know too many people. So you did your work, and I tell you, at night you were so tired that you didn't think about anything. You thought that, oh, another day, I went barefoot till November. And in Germany, and I think in all Europe, when it snows, it snows. There is from November till March. The snow doesn't even melt. Here, the bulldozers come, they clean up, and you can walk. And I walked barefoot. So finally, at the end of December, I think, our camp got 10 pair of those Harland shoes. The wooden, with the wooden soles. and so I got one. So, but that was a hindrance because you had to stay when you went to work in a row, and the snow backed up on the wood. So I had to stay behind and do with the pickaxe or with the shovel and take off the snow. So I got hit always. You know, it wasn't easy if it was summer or winter or it was in the summer. It was very bad, and a lot of women, thanks God, that didn't happen to me. From the sand, the sun baked it up on their feet, and they were sent to Auschwitz, and they went unfortunately to the showers, the real showers.
Well, I know everyone here, Miriam, joins us in thanking you
Well,
for sharing your incredible story and for reminding us to set our priorities in life. And you have clearly set those priorities and reminded us what they are today.
well, look, sure, and I hope it will change, and it will be again, education will count, and because now I think a plumber makes more than a college graduate because you are over educated.
Thank you very much for having us.
Well, I know you said that you never really, you knew that later on you would want more than a potato. Well, here at Temple Har Shalom, we give everyone a challah because we have a challah kitchen and it's no need to feed so that no one ever goes hungry, and we hope it'll sweeten your Shabbat.
Oh, sure.
Okay, good.
2 days Shabbat.
2 days is Shabbat. And also so you can remember your time with us. It's the poster we made of you and your family.
Where I
So-
am now, it is, you know, a very orthodox place, and everything is blood culture.
Yes.
But for Shabbos, we get, there is no special food for the kids. So we get yes rabbis. Sometimes they are not rabbis.
Right.
They are.
May people come up and thank you?
Sure.
Yes, please. So before you leave, please come up and say thank you to Miriam and come meet her and offer your gratitude. And thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Not very long. Interesting. After I was born, we had at least 12 different to encourage them to write. So we started writing this with our grandmothers. And it was Mother's Day, 5 years ago. Wanted to know things about life. So my faith was based on my mother.
So happy you
Where do you live now?
Then it's very emotional. So the rest of it,
That's where my in-laws used to live.
my mother did. She lost them. She gave us a lot. Two promises she made. One was that life is not right to correct the English and grammar. And the second was that I have to read.
They were there.
After my wife read it, she told my mother, I said, January, no way Sam can't read this. So I said, no, very beaten. She didn't get into it, but she said she was in the company ghetto. The company ghetto was famous. It's the only ghetto that was Victorian and Decoration. So, in the company ghetto, my dad was in the local idea. So, two of his friends, one was a photographer, one was an essayist. The essayist wrote a book about the real photographer developed his photography very few. And after the war, they went back and sharing their stories. They married in the ghetto. When he was in Washington, the special Holocaust ghetto, I called her and she was interviewed. So we had for a year and a half. Face was all over it, the video and everything. So when friends would go down and come back, they all know her as Oma. Because all the grandkids call her Oma. So all the friends would always say, but she's also been for Spielberg. You know what? The funny thing is, every time she tells a story, I had her. She assured me she had them in the right order and everything. I didn't check them out. But you betcha. Somebody want to accompany me? So, we were. She was invited to speak at Lafayette this fall. So my wife and I and daughter took her out, and she's giving her speech, and she talks about her boyfriend she had in the ghetto. So we get in the car to come back. She said, boyfriend in the ghetto? I said, oh yeah, I had a boyfriend in the ghetto. She was killed. Stories that she comes up with. Just very recent. It was very tough on me and my much younger sister living in Springfield. We were the oddballs. We didn't have a car. I was the first one in my